Inflation just went airborne, and it's probably going to get a lot worse and relatively soon too. This is one of the most actionable and significant videos I've ever made, which might explain why I'm up at 4 in the morning filming this. It involves a link between consumer price inflation, producer price inflation, and, bear with me, Iran and Israel. It's going to involve gold. It's going to involve a trade I made where I sold one of my favorite gold stocks to buy another type of stock. And I'll tell you all about that in this video. There's so much going on. Bear with me. It's going to be pieces all over the place, but it's going to tell you a big story. By the end of it, you're going to see the significant opportunities and risks that are setting up right now, which made me sell a stock I love to buy something else. And it also showed me that the Federal Reserve has lost their fight against inflation and that there's nothing going to stop it going much higher soon. Producer price and consumer price inflation have both gone up even after all the interest rate hikes that the Federal Reserve has done. Now there's not going to be anything to stop the big inflationary bounce premise I told you about many moons ago. And it's all going to be exacerbated by all the things that are going on militarily around the world. Israel just hit Aleppo and Damascus, to the Syrian airports. That represents a major step forward, a major escalation in all the fighting that's going on there. It's only going to get worse. It's going to add to the inflationary pressure that the Federal Reserve has already lost their fight against. So stick with me. This is one of the most important videos I've ever made. It's totally actionable, and you don't want to miss out on what I'm about to tell you.
At Peter Leeds, we're all about getting you profits quickly and easily. Please subscribe for more premium investor enlightenment.
Here's a chart of the breakdown of inflation from CNBC. You can see where all the prices are going up, what types of things. And the reason I'm saying that inflation is going airborne is because wholesale inflation, which is producer price inflation, and consumer price inflation both came in hotter than expected, despite the financially painful interest rate hikes that we've seen over recent history. Here's a chart of the federal funds rate, putting it in the range of 5.25% to 5.5%, which is in fact a 22-year high for interest rates. What that does is it makes debts more expensive to pay off. Credit cards, mortgages, auto loans, corporate lines of credit, everything costs more to service the debt because the interest rates are so much higher.
And these guerrilla tactics that are employed by Hamas during Saturday's initial attack on Israel indicate that Iran likely played an influential role in this assault.
And when oil prices go higher, that will only add to the inflationary pressures. Oil is used by every person, every corporation, for every product, just about. And when oil prices go higher, that puts an added expense on everything.
Was Iran somehow in on it in terms of training, helping over time and arming Hamas? Or is it some higher level where they're actually kind of orchestrating it and ordering it even?
And if you think oil is going to go up a lot, just wait until Israel starts dealing with Hamas and Hezbollah in Syria and eventually Iran.
I am confident this was planned and funded by the Iranians.
And late last night, I wrote a letter to all the subscribers of the Peter Leeds newsletter. And one of the things I said in there was that it doesn't actually have to come to a hot war, an actual military conflict. It just has to have a rise in rhetoric for oil prices to start going higher. If there is an actual hot war, somebody takes out the oil infrastructure in Iran, that's going to send the price of oil through the roof. And if Iran gets into that, they're going to shut down the Straight of Hormuz. And I told you before, 33% of the world's natural gas goes through the Strait of Hormuz, 25% of the world's oil.
And I'll say this to Prime Minister Netanyahu, finish them. Finish them. Hamas did this. You know Iran's behind it. Finish them. They should have hell to pay for what they've just done.
And I also said in that special letter to the subscribers of the Peter Leeds newsletter that if 25% of the oil is blocked, that doesn't increase prices by 25%. It increases it by significantly more than that. For multiple decades, it's been known that Hamas and Hezbollah are both backed by the Iranian government, and now it's being more widely addressed and known.
This dropped a couple of hours ago, and I kind of just first want you to walk us through some of the reporting that we're hearing on this and some of the indications in the way in which Hamas launched this attack that would indicate it was backed by, planned by possibly, as the Wall Street Journal is reporting, Iran.
And Israel just hit two of the airports in Syria. So people are talking about if there's going to be an escalation of this war. Just look what's happening. You've got United Kingdom's carrier force coming down to join the American force. And then you've got Israel hitting Hamas, of course, Hezbollah, of course, Syria now also. What's next is Iran.
Now then, Israel has confirmed it is responsible for 2 simultaneous attacks in Syria. One targeted Aleppo International Airport, which is currently out of service. The other strike hit the capital, Damascus Airport, in fact.
What I explained to my newsletter subscribers is that I sold a portion of my holdings of Barrick Gold, and that doesn't mean I don't like Barrick. I think it's going to do great. It's going to go a lot higher. But I moved that money immediately into a really good oil company. I told the subscribers exactly which company it is, but the point is that oil prices are going to go a lot higher, in my opinion, even without a hot war with Iran. Just the rhetoric alone will be significant.
We don't know precisely what Iran's role was, and that's why you see some discussion here that you referred to, right? So the Wall Street Journal is saying that Hamas gave them a full-blown kind of a green light. We're kind of in on detailed planning all the way and including the timing.
If there's a hot war, then this means that prices are going to go astronomical, and they'll go up even more than I expect for gold to go up. And you guys know I'm a huge believer in gold. I'm a huge believer in Barrick Gold as one of my holdings, but I found a better opportunity, in my opinion.
We're going to do whatever we have to do to send a lesson that they're going to understand for many, many decades. Not just Hamas, not just the other terror organizations in Gaza, but all the terror organizations and all the enemies of Israel, and Iran is the biggest enemy of all, and they're pulling the strings.
So when oil prices go up, it's going to mean more costs for everybody across the board. It's going to add to the inflationary pressures. It'll be incredibly inflationary and actually strong enough to overcome the deflationary pressures we're seeing from automation and artificial intelligence.
And they're an oil-based economy, so I talked to the Israelis today. Clearly, Iran's behind this.
And wildcard, this makes it an absolute opportune time for China to make a move on Taiwan. And I don't think that they're going to do it soon. I'm not saying that they would. But who's keeping China from actually doing it? It's not Australia or Canada. It's the United States. But the United States is pulled in a few other directions right now. Talk about we're giving weapons to Ukraine. We're giving weapons to Israel. Do we have any weapons left for ourselves? It's a little bit thinner than it used to be.
That's right. So, maybe we should start with what we saw during the assault, right? What we saw during this attack. So you had a very sophisticated attack in some ways, right? There were many aspects to it. They were coming on the sea and fast speedboats, which is a kind of very known Iranian tactic, right? In the Gulf, Iran will often use speedboats to swarm around large naval ships, U.S. naval ships.
And a lot of times in how world wars expand is when there's an opportune moment. There's a lot of bad actors who will make a move. Because, for example, China could more easily make a move on Taiwan when America's kind of distracted with other things. It's going to be harder for us to stand up as strongly as we would have in a different situation. Consumer prices rose 0.4% in September. That was more than expected. Wholesale inflation rose 0.5% for the month. These numbers might sound small, but they're for the month. So there's times them by 12 to get an idea of what they theoretically could be if it was over a year at that pace. Excluding food and energy, which who doesn't use food and energy, right? Core PPI was up 0.3% versus a forecast for 2%. Inflationary pressures came primarily from final demand goods, which surged 0.9% for the month, indicating simmering inflation pressures for the U.S. economy. And this is even after all of the interest rate hikes that we've seen. And it's already having a toll. People are living off their credit cards now. People are having financial difficulty because of the interest rates. The consumer is starting to feel it now, big time. Like I told you before that they eventually would. We get to this point. The same thing's happening with the defaults and bankruptcies. There's been a lot of them, but there's going to be even more because now there's been a lot of pain for a while now.
We're going to blow up your oil refineries and put you out of business. It is now time to take the war to the Ayatollah's backyard.
And the Federal Reserve is losing the fight against inflation because inflation is now still going higher even after the rate hikes. Add to that, higher oil prices coming up very soon. That's going to make the inflation get away from them. And then the only way that they can really try to fight it or stop it or bring it back to where they want it to is to break the economy. With high producer price inflation, that gives you a lot of push through inflation, which means it takes a company a lot more money to get all the parts they need to make something to sell to you, so they got to charge you more for it.
Iran has armed and trained Hamas for 30 years, and without Iran, there would be no Hamas.
Much of the goods price increases came from gasoline, which jumped 5.4%. While food prices posted a 0.9% gain. This is in a month. Energy prices broadly rose 3.3%. And could energy prices go up a lot more than that in a short window of time? As long as nobody starts talking about taking out Iran's oil infrastructure, then I guess we should be fine, right?
Without oil, they have no money. Without money, the terrorism loses its biggest benefactor.
Now listen to this. This is from a CNBC article. The Fed targets 2% annual inflation, but doesn't expect to get there for several years. I guess Powell wasn't joking when he said higher for longer. And you might say, didn't oil prices come down significantly the other day because Saudi Arabia made a pledge to stabilize the oil markets? Which basically means they're going to produce more or export more oil to bring the prices down. That will easily be overridden by any kind of expansion of this war in the Middle East. You've already got Israel fighting Hamas, shooting back at Hezbollah, and Hezbollah is like a pretty significant army. Then you've got Syria, and they actually just hit the Syrian airports. And there's so much rhetoric right now that's on the rise. And it doesn't need to be an actual attack on Iran. The real growth will come when everybody just starts talking about it. It sort of steps into everyone's focus. On the media, you're going to see people talking about hitting Iran.
Then we also saw them hitting multiple points along that southern border with Gaza, with Israel, and hitting many, many places at different times. You saw that footage even in the air. So there was a sophistication to it.
That rhetoric alone will be enough to really push oil prices. And a military conflict with Iran would mean that they would block the Strait of Hormuz. And it's actually in my book here that I said sometimes a thing cannot be got at any price. It's not about, okay, I'll pay more. It's hard to get oil, so I'll pay more, and you pay more. Prices go up. Sometimes a thing cannot be got. And I talk about this in my book. And by the way, if you want this book, I will ship it to you at my cost anywhere in the world. If you get a hard copy, I autograph it. Plus it comes with the audio version and the digital version. Link below if you're interested. Does it make a great gift? Of course it does.
With respect to what happened in Damascus and Aleppo, Israeli airplanes hit both the airports in Damascus and Aleppo, and now both airports are out of service. According to Israeli military spokesperson, this attack comes as a retaliation to several shells that were launched from the Syrian border towards Israel. And also he said that there are going to be more strikes on targets in Syria. Now,
Russia and Saudi Arabia met in Moscow on Wednesday when Russian President Vladimir Putin said that OPEC Plus coordination will continue for the predictability of the oil market. And I got a screenshot here to show you who's in OPEC Plus. You got countries like Mexico, Oman, Bahrain, Kazakhstan. And OPEC itself, the real OPEC, they produce 28.7 million barrels of oil per day, whereas OPEC Plus produces 16.5 million. Russia accounts for 10.3 million of that. This is from the U.S. Energy Information Administration.
Now, this is happening as current U.S. officials are pushing back on that reporting from the Wall Street Journal. That goes a step further, saying, quote, this, Iran helped plot the attack on Israel over several weeks.
Fed officials see restrictive policy staying in place until inflation eases. A point of complete agreement on the Fed committee was the belief that the policy should remain restrictive for some time until the committee is confident that inflation is moving down sustainably toward its objective. Their objective is 2%. What happens when inflation keeps on climbing higher? What do they do then? They won't be confident for a long time, so they'll have to either just leave the rates high or they'll have to keep raising rates even more than they're already at. But it's going to make it more difficult for them to just create a whole bunch of more government debt, which is what they're going to do, more quantitative easing, which is the next part of my premise of the big inflationary bounce, that's when it's really going to kick in. When they do the quantitative easing, they overreact and they just come down with this big dose of money. And I told you guys about this months and months and quarters ago. That's when we get serious inflation. But they're going to have to produce more money or create more money because they're paying for all of these wars. And no one's going to question creating new money to pay for a war.
This attack would not have been possible without Iran's aid, and I am confident over time we will see Iranian fingerprints all over this.
The FOMC, that's the Federal Open Market Committee, since March 2022 has raised its key interest rate 11 times, taking it to the targeted range of 5.25% to 5.5%, which is the highest level in 22 years.
Behind the scenes, giving money, giving weapons, having meetings to try to coordinate attacks in Israel. And as I speak to you, Iran is trying to push other people into the theater of war.
If you look at the traders in the Fed funds futures markets, you can tell what they're betting on is going to happen. So at this point, the chances, based on their trading, that there will be an interest rate increase in November is 8.5%, and it's 27.9% for December. That's according to the Fed Watch gauge.
Jake Sullivan says they still don't have proof that Iran was directly responsible. Today, Iran's supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khomeini, denied Iran was behind the attack, claiming that those saying so are wrong. But he added, "We kiss the hands of those who planned the attack."
Most FOMC members see upside risks to prices, along with the potential for slower growth and higher unemployment. Consumers have continued to spend, though officials worried about the impact from tighter credit conditions, less fiscal stimulus, and the resumption of student loan payments.
And then there was all these kind of guerrilla tactics. There was all this hostage taking that we've been hearing about, small sort of hostage taking cells that were crossing in to Israel.
Many participants remarked that the finances of some households were coming under pressure amid high inflation and declining savings, and there had been an increasing reliance on credit to finance expenditures.
But the real culprit here is Iran. Without aid from Iran, there would be no Hamas capability to attack Israel.
So in summary, I sold a gold stock that I really love, and I think it's going to go a lot higher because I think a better opportunity was to get into an oil company, which I think will do even better, of course.
And all of this, according to some very senior former intelligence officials who spoke to us, they were saying this really is very familiar. This is kind of Iranian playbook 101.
At the same time, inflation has gotten completely away from the Federal Reserve. Even after all the interest rate hikes, it's going higher. As we go through the big inflationary balance premise, they cannot win the fight against inflation now at this point without breaking the economy. And there's going to be supercharged inflation as soon as oil prices spike, as all of this chaos breaks out even more around the world. Does it feel to you like this war is expanding? You see how world wars break out? They start like this, then you got the UK carrier group coming in to join the American one. You've got Israel shooting in 3 different directions to defend themselves. And a lot of the stocks that we talk about in the Peter Leeds newsletter are doing the best are stocks that are uranium companies. Gold companies, I believe, are going to do incredibly well. Oil will do even better, in my opinion, at this point because of the geopolitical situation. Right now is an incredibly significant situation in the world. Nothing has been like this for a long time, since maybe 1939. So you got to get positioned and be ready for everything that's about to break out. And you can get more videos just like this for 10 cents a day if you want to join the Peter Leeds Army. It also gets the Peter Leeds Army exclusive and awesome email replies from me and my team just by going to peterleeds.com/army. It'll cost you 10 cents a day.
At Peter Leeds, we're all about getting you profits quickly and easily. Please subscribe for more premium investor enlightenment.